the Heart series, some subjects and some things that are just going on. Oh, gracious greetings, Saints, Stephen, family, and guests. Welcome to another edition of Living Water for a Thirsty Thursday. Out here on another beautiful Southern California day. And just a quick word to share about some things we're going to talk about for the next few weeks. I want to talk about obedience, which we've addressed a little bit in the past, as well as character and compassion. But obedience, I'm sure you've heard the text in 1 Samuel 15:22 that talks about God would rather us to have obedience than sacrifice. And the text specifically says in 15:22, it says, "And Saul said, hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams." And so context in this is important, because I know a lot of people hear this and you start thinking, man, obedience is better than sacrifice. But then if God asks us to sacrifice, we need to be obedient in performing the sacrifices. And so isn't there a level of obedience even in offering the sacrifice? Well, that's why context is so important. And so if you remember what was going on here in 1 Samuel 15, we actually have Samuel, who is being the voice of God to Saul and letting him know that when God sent Saul to war, that he asked him to destroy the Amalekites and all of their sheep and cattle, everything. Do not allow anything to live. But we know that Saul allowed the people to sway his heart, and they kept the fatted rams and they kept other livestock. And he said what he wanted to do was offer it to the Lord. And of course, God said, did not ask you to kill it all. And he said, but I was going to give it as an offering. And so God is then saying, is it better to be obedient and do what I asked you to do, or to give me these sacrifices? And so context is important here. Obedience is needed for both, but God gave him specific instructions on how to deal with this situation, how to deal with this war. I think when we fast forward that to today, are we as obedient as we need to be to God, number one, in the workplace, of course, with our spouses, in our singleness, with our children, in our neighborhoods, concerning laws and rules and structures? You know, obedience seems to be something that is relative. When it's convenient, I don't mind being obedient. When it's not easy, then all of a sudden disobedience creeps in and we find a reason to justify the disobedience. And that's exactly what was going on in this case with Saul, justifying his disobedience through the umbrella, if you would, of sacrifice. And there are some things that, we can be on the freeway, I know for me, and speed, and can justify it by saying, I'm going with the flow of traffic, but it's still disobedience. And that's why we want to unpack this a little bit and talk about obedience and sacrifice and the sacrifices that we make. And indeed, do we give God the sacrifice of obedience? And then how that relates to character. And is it a character flaw? And really just looking not just into the spiritual side of this, but the emotional, mental side as well, where our character development is. And then, of course, we'll talk about compassion, because it just seems like some things in our world and the way we are, we lack sensitivity and compassion when it's so critically needed. And so here over the next few weeks, we're really just going to have kind of a From the Heart series, some subjects and some things that are just going on. One, starting with obedience, moving on over to character, which is so important, and then compassion. Well, read through that 15th chapter of 1 Samuel and glean what you can and catch the context as we delve into this a little bit more. Continue to make God proud in all you say, think,